All right, good morning, everyone. My name is Nahom Daniel. I'm a community navigator with the YMCA, and I will be the moderator for this event titled Establishing Trust, Basic Principles and Practical Examples for Researchers on How to Partner with Community. So this is a joint event with the UW Fred Hutch CFAR Office of Community Engagement and the CFAR Developmental Core. And just to give a brief format of the event, it's going to be a 1.5 hour discussion about community engaged science, with the majority of time dedicated to an open Q&A. So we'll start off with having all the panelists do a brief self-introduction, making my job a little easier. And then we'll move into a group activity. And then from there, we'll have all the panelists kind of just summarize their thoughts on community engaged science in a short, open speech or monologue, I guess. And then the rest of the panel will be dedicated to the open Q&A, where you guys can ask the panelists how to, how to effectively engage with communities and build that trust. And I just want to remind everyone that this is an open, safe, and professional space for all of you to ask questions to improve as researchers and to effectively build trust with the communities of interest. Okay, so let's start with our self-introductions. And while everyone is introducing themselves, I want the audience to come up with some potential questions when we move on to the next segment, which is an open Q&A. So let's have Michele Andrasik go first.
Hey, great. Hello, everyone. So great to be here with all of you. My name is Michele Andrasik. I use she and her pronouns. I am the Director of Community Engagement and Social and Behavioral Sciences for the HIV Vaccine Trials Network, housed here in Seattle at the Fred Hutch. I'm also a Senior Staff Scientist in the Fred Hutch Vaccine and Infectious Disease Division, and I have appointments in both the Departments of Global Health and Environmental and Occupational Health Sciences at the University of Washington. So great to see all of you. Much of my work really has focused on HIV prevention. I've been working in HIV prevention since the late 80s. And a lot of what I do is really looking at social and structural factors that impact health and create health inequities and disparities for BIPOC people and people who are sexual and gender minorities.
Thank you, Michele. Looking forward to hearing your perspective. All right, Michele Lemons, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning, everyone. My name is Michele Lemons. I use she, her pronouns. I am here serving in my capacity as the health minister for my church, New Salem Baptist Church in Tacoma. I also have a great deal of experience connecting with the community in other capacities, such as serving on our Human Rights Commission in Tacoma, serving as president of the Hilltop Action Coalition as well, and working at an AIDS Foundation in Tacoma in prevention and outreach specifically to the Black community. So I'm very excited to be here and contribute to this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you, Michele. Michael Louella, you want to go ahead?
Yes, thank you. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you may be. My name is Michael. I live here in Washington and Seattle, and I work for 3 different research groups, and I work with them in the same capacity, doing outreach and recruitment and working on community engagement. So I work for the AIDS Clinical Trials Unit. That's the local unit here of the ACTG network. I also work for the ex-Martin Delaney collaboratory called defeatHIV, working on a cure. And I also work for the Center for AIDS Research as a community liaison. That's me.
Thank you, Michael. Last but not least, Rahel Schwartz.
Good morning, everyone. Excited to be here and good to see you all at 8 o'clock in the morning. My name is Rahel Schwartz. I work as a program executive of health equity for the YMCA of Greater Seattle. My role at the YMCA is developing community outreach strategies with a focus on building long-term partnerships with key stakeholders, including community and faith-based organizations and other institutions serving Black, African-American, and other BIPOC communities. And in addition, I work on designing and implementing culturally and linguistically tailored chronic disease prevention programs, including the diabetes prevention, weight loss, and other programs focused on youth, specifically in under-resourced and historically marginalized communities who are disproportionately affected by chronic illnesses. I'm also actively engaged in the Harambe project at CFAR, serving as a principal investigator to address intersectional stigmas and HIV testing in African immigrant communities in King County at UW and Fred Hatch. And thank you and nice to see you all.
Thank you, Rahel. I'm very excited. As you can see, we have a very diverse set of panelists with diverse experiences. So it's going to be an interesting discussion. Okay, now we are going to move into a brief group activity before we go into the open Q&A. Jasmine, could you please set that up?
Surely, one moment.
So what this is going to be is we are going to participate in a word cloud where you're going to write the first things that come to mind when you hear the words or the phrase community engagement. And then we'll kind of just see some common themes and it'll set us up as a good framing for the rest of the discussion.
Okay, I just put the word cloud link into the chat box and then I'll also project it momentarily.
Thank you.
Yeah. I think folks can get started and I'll just project it in the background as people talk.
Okay. So relationships seems to be the dominant word. Partnerships, that's great. I like that. It's definitely a partnership, not one way. Voice, empathy, sharing, ownership. Interesting. I'd like to hear the perspective on that. Empathy, representation, listening, sharing, humility, collaboration. Great. Give it a couple more seconds. Okay, I think that should be good.
Okay.
So yeah, trust, partnership, and connection seem to be the most dominant themes when you hear the words or the phrase community engagement. Okay, now with that framing in mind, let's move on to the open Q&A. So this is, again, a chance for you all to ask your questions on how to engage with communities more effectively and in a more meaningful format. So you can either drop your questions in the chat and I can read it out loud for you, or you can raise your hand with the raise hand feature and I can call you out. You can ask your question. So while you guys do that, I actually have a couple questions myself for the panelists while we wait on everyone to write theirs in. So I think we should start it off with, the first thing that comes to mind. So what are the first steps in building trust in communities? And I'm going to select Rahel to answer this one first.
I think when I think about building trust in communities, the first thing that comes to mind is every researcher or organization trying to engage a community have to take time to develop relationship with existing organizations who are trusted in the community, and we can get introduced to the community through those relationships. So that is the first step. We can't develop relationship overnight. So we have to do it prior to, but also through other organizations who are serving those communities, so that it will give you an idea of what the culture and also, you know, to learn and take your time. We have to listen, you know, take the time to listen to the communities. I think a lot of times, you know, people, you know, feel like they do have the solution for communities, especially in, you know, underserved or marginalized communities. Based on data that we read, we believe that we have the solution for the problem. So when we approach them as if that we do, you know, without asking what are their immediate needs are. So I think that the most important thing in the first steps in building trust in communities is, you know, developing relationship.
Thank you, Rahel. Yeah, definitely working with the key stakeholders of that community is essential, gaining trust. Micheale, do you have anything else to add?
I would just add that acknowledging any possible harm that's played a part in the past is a big part of rebuilding trust. You know, I think that there's a lot of hesitance with the community when you're engaging them, and you know, acknowledging that and just being, you know, very upfront and transparent about, you know, why you want to connect with the community. Like Rahel said, really coming in with a trusted partner, and then, you know, very much so being transparent about why you're there. What does communication look like? What does follow-up look like? Those are imperative. And those are ways that the community themselves can have some agency and ownership around holding you as a person or a partner accountable. And like, what does that mean for us in rebuilding this trust and really figuring out what trust looks like between you and the community?
Thank you, Micheale. Michael, do you have anything to add?
Oh, yes. I just wanted to take a step back because I heard a lot of things that kind of reminded me of what I sort of base my entire look when we talk about engaging community or engaging stakeholders. And I wanted to quick share this little thing with y'all. You know, like if you think about it, engagement is, and we've already had people share this with us here. I'm glad to see people had the same answer. But, you know, you ask any high school student what an engagement is, and they're going to tell you it's building a relationship or starting a relationship and maintaining it. And now you can have that relationship with individuals or groups of people. You could have them on a local level. You could have them on a national level. You could have them on an international level. And I think the whole purpose of these relationships, and especially when we're talking about HIV research and communities affected by HIV, we're talking about aligning the interests of those groups because they're not always in line with each other. And why do we do that? Well, you're doing that because you're hoping to get some cooperation around the research study. And you're also hoping that what you're doing is more than just cooperating with each other, that you're inviting community in to co-create the research with you. And I think that's an important thing to realize. So it's just like a marriage of people with a significant other. You would have certain things that you would want to do to maintain that relationship over a course of time. And I just wanted to point these out. Some of you might recognize these because they're sort of famous because they've come from some work in good participatory practice, which was created as a pillar for engagement, and that came out through the UNAIDS as well as AVAC's work. And you can even look this up. So if you've never heard of good participatory practices, you can go to the AVAC website. which is avac.org, and then just put /GPP, which is good participatory practice. And you'll be able to do some good reading on what I think are pillars in terms of engagement. And I just wanted to put that all out there as a plug, because I felt like that was really important for us all to hear. So I'm going to stop sharing that. And where's my stop sharing? Well,
Thank you,
I
Michael.
got it
Yep.
for you.
You got it. Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. I love that analogy. That's a great analogy. Instead of viewing communities as just a resource, as a relationship, engaging them and, literally trying to build that relationship. So I love that. And just for the audience, we can send out that slide in an email afterwards in case you guys want to follow that link or just have that slide on handy. And Michele, do you have any last words to add for this question?
Yeah, I get building on the great responses that preceded me. I think I would just add that, in terms of thinking about community engagement from an organizational and institutional perspective, often, I see that people are appointed as the community engagement representative, and community engagement really has to be a responsibility of everyone at the institution and not solely one department or one individual or a group of individuals. It's really critical that everyone is thinking about how to engage the communities that they work with. And that engagement really has to be reciprocal. I think often we don't sit back and assess, what capacity are we bringing to the table and what capacity do we need, as well as what capacity are community stakeholders, community members bringing to the table, and what capacity do they need to show up in a meaningful way. So often when we have community involved in the research, it's really critical that community have the tools that they need to be able to show up and contribute and be meaningfully involved. Whether that's training them on how to read a protocol or what to expect in an informed consent form. All of that is really, really critical. And then the flip side of that is that, investigators, scientists, and organizational leaders have to know how to show up in communities in a meaningful way. And what does it mean to approach communities with humility and with respect? And how do you do that on an ongoing basis? And really understanding that relationship building is ongoing and it's iterative and that it's something that is you're constantly nurturing like a relationship. I love that analogy. So I think that is what I would add to what all of my other fabulous panelists have presented before me.
Thank you, Michele. I definitely agree that community engagement needs to be something prioritized and needs to be seen as an all hands on deck thing. Does anyone from the audience have any questions so far? Okay, it looks like people are still thinking. Don't worry though, I have a couple more, so I'll buy you guys some time. Oh, Rahel, were you about to say something?
No, I don't have any.
Okay. My next question is, what are some common mistakes you see with the way researchers approach communities to conduct research? And Rahel, since you're already unmuted, why don't you take this one?
I think if researchers are coming into the community with pre-existing ideas or pre-existing project that hasn't been informed by the community, and if they don't ask, what can we do to work with you? The reaction of the community members would be a lot suspicious, and you know, there will be, you know, resistance to whatever, you know, the researcher is bringing to that community. I think that will bring a feeling of, you know, once again, you know, we're going to be used, you know, so to speak. So approaching communities with a history of being poor and under-resourced, and telling them how, you know, they're going to, you know, we are going to fix all, you know, your social problems doesn't go, you know, very far, and doesn't result in research that's very useful for the community or the organization, you know, working with it. I think it is always necessary to have, you know, mutual respect and a partnership that is mutually beneficial to foster trusting relationships. We have to have an open dialogue from the beginning through the process afterwards. Like as Michele said, you know, we have to, relationship is not, we're not going to build relationship overnight. It has to continue throughout the process, even sometimes when you have to, you know, sit back and listening is the hardest thing to do, but that is the most important thing to do, especially you know, trying to work with a community that are disproportionately affected by so many health issues, and also don't trust you know, anyone from the medical community. So I think having cultural sensitivity, which also shows the community that you have respect, and also trust the expertise in the community. It's not that, you know, I think the assumption of people that being poor doesn't mean that we don't have the knowledge, because we have to leverage those resources actually to do research successfully. So appreciating that, listening, you know, continue to have a dialogue, an open dialogue, and be transparent all the time, and make the community lead the work. And I think if we learn to do that, then, you know, we will be able to approach communities and conduct research, you know, successfully.
Thank you, Rahel. I love what you said, especially about engaging communities early. I think too often researchers going at the very last stages of a project and just expect the communities to be open to that. But no, early, as in even the grant writing process, communities need to be engaged. Okay, how about Michele? Do you have anything to add about common mistakes with the way researchers approach communities?
Rahel pretty much, you know, nail on the head for me. But if I have to add anything, it's what I've seen most recently is a lot of failure to use plain talk. And I think that there's a misconception of taking things from this high technical level to just something that we all understand, you know? And I think that what I've heard from some folks in a negative view is they feel as if they are, you know, dumbing it down. That's not the same as plain talk. You know, coming to me and in a way where it's not condescending, you know, it doesn't feel as though you are holding your knowledge of your expertise over my head and making me feel as if I'm not the subject matter expert. Thank you, Alicia, I saw that. Is very important. And I think that that's crucial in the form of trust building. And if I am used to, as especially as someone, as Rahel said, that is used to being disadvantaged or used to being spoken down to, if that's what my experience has been from folks from the medical community, and you come into the community, tell me you want to do all of these things to supposedly help me and not explain it in a way that I'm understanding, that means that to me, that's received as you don't want to have that communication. You don't want to have a conversation with two sides or with multiple viewpoints. So I think that's definitely something I've seen very recently, and a huge complaint like from community members and I think something that can be resolved for sure, with just listening. Again, as Rahel said, it's very important to just listen and have that conversation, and really patience and time. You know, trust isn't built overnight. So if you want to truly build a relationship, like Michael said, a successful engagement, it takes some time to get to know each other.
Thank you, Michele. Michael or Michele, do you guys have anything to add?
Yes, the question was where researchers go wrong or the mistakes they make. I think it's right from the start, coming up with research questions. Do you have the communities that you're seeking to serve helping you discover what research questions you should even be going through? And I know if you've been looking in the chat, someone was asking, what do we do with communities as we're pursuing funding? I think coming up with research questions and hearing what their concerns are and realizing how your research can then maybe be informed by the lived experience of the people that you're seeking to aid or to focus your research on. So right from there, I think they also make mistakes because they don't ever think about funding fully their engagement process. They don't think about the monies that are needed to have successful engagement. And that includes things like advertising on social media. That includes having full-time staff, a staff person that you can hire from the communities that you're working with so they can better reflect the communities in the research and creating that capacity in the community for doing research in a clinical way. I think they don't do that. And so they create a grant, for instance, that won't have the monies that they need to really do it well. So I always think that we err on the side of not fully funding all of our community engagement. It should be a large focus for every researcher, especially if they're doing research with people. They want to make sure that they're putting a lot of money so they can have a robust effort reflected. And that's how they're going to get the best answers as a result.
Thank you, Michael. Again, seems like it's a common theme of early engagement with communities in order to build that trust. Michele, any last thoughts?
I think the one thing that I would add is that, you know, it's incredibly important for researchers to check our privilege. You know, just building on what everyone else has said, like even if you have been working with a community your entire career does not mean you have mastery over that community. There is always a need to involve community, engage community early on and often. And even if you identify with that community, there is privilege in your status, perhaps in your institution, and how might that privilege impact your perspective, your worldview. And I think it's really critical, as all my panelists have said, that you sit, you listen. Understanding is critical, and ensuring that your relationships are strong, and that you're not relying on your own expertise of a specific community, because I would argue that none of us are experts in the communities that we serve. And really, we are good partners to the communities that we serve at best.
I would love to add to further thoughts that there is an inherent uneven playing field. There's a power dynamic that is not favoring the community, and that researchers really need to actively work towards leveling that. That really means making them partners, making community members partners. They should be co-researchers with you. They should become as equal to the PI of the study that might be unfolding. They need to have that level brought up. So researchers are really going to have to do a lot to compensate for that, because there is such a power dynamic. Just even the fact of where we do research, you might have them be coming into a university setting where it's just going to make them feel so alien because it is full of security guards and people checking, and they don't feel like they fit in there. Maybe they never went to college. And so there's so many impositions that we don't even think about when we're engaging with community. We should be meeting on their terms. We should be meeting in their spaces. If they have them, we should be building capacity for them to have those spaces, and we should be helping them out in all the ways that we can besides our research. One of my native elders always says, like, we often ask with empty hands, gimme, 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 but you should ask with a full hand. You should be actually, before you ask anything, you should be presenting a gift. You should be giving something because you're asking for something. So you start off by giving. And I think keeping that hand full of things that you're giving is always a wise thing when you're going to ask anything of community.
Thank you so much,
true.
Michael.
Yeah, and Michael, I think like even the way we meet and the way we introduce ourselves and how we conduct our meetings, where we conduct our meetings, whether or not there's food present and there's time to really mingle and get to know each other, and before you launch into business, as usual, all of these things are really critical. And again, it's about the relationship and knowing what is appropriate and what is respectful as you're going into these discussions and really strengthening the relationship. That is the key to everything. It's not about what you're asking for. It's about how you are growing the relationship and nurturing the relationship.
I just want to add one thing. Also, don't assume that every community is the same. Don't assume that if you're working with one East African population, not all East African community members have the same culture, same tradition. Even it's different from generation to generation, different, working with young people who were born and raised in the United States, but their parents are from one of the countries. Even like I am originally from Ethiopia. We have 86 different languages in my country, and we have different tribes. We have so many cultural differences within our own country. It doesn't, what works for one doesn't work for the other population. So it's always, don't assume. That is the importance of getting to know the community. That way, as you try to work through or and do any type of research or any type of health promotion or health related classes, programs, you have to base it on what works for each communities and populations. So, don't assume that we're all the same. I always say that I don't represent the all East African countries. But, we have to take time to understand. That way we can do our work successfully.
Thank you, Rahel. Thank you to all the panelists. And I love that these examples that you are all given, especially about coming to communities with full hands and not empty hands, not just asking for resources all the time. And I think that leads perfectly into our next question. But before I move on to that, I want to remind everyone in this Zoom chat that this is an open discussion, right? And I know that a lot of the audience members are experts in this field and have a lot of experience with community engagement. So when I ask these questions, this is also an opportunity for the audience to raise their hands and give their thoughts. So for this question about
so my hand is raised.
Yes, I will pick you next.
Okay.
Yeah. So if anyone has anything to add about common mistakes they see with researchers, please go ahead and raise your hand or drop it in the chat. Barbara, go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you guys. This is absolutely wonderful. So thank you. I don't have anything to add about what I see. I think that you guys are spot on. But I do want to ask the question about the community itself. Sometimes is hierarchical, or people who come to the table to engage with researchers are different than people who don't. And so my question is, are there any suggestions or strategies that you guys would recommend to really get beyond the choir? I think so many times that even the organizations that are chosen or that come to the table to participate, there's certain types, and real community engagement to me is when you have a really diverse group of people participating. And so what would you recommend to make sure that that happens?
Well, I can say that has been an ongoing challenge. And it has been something that I've been working on for a really long time, as I know many other people on in this call have as well. And, one of the low hanging fruit, I would say, that we really focus on is the CAB, because the CAB is a place where people can come together and can decide, how much time and effort they can, given their life circumstances, be involved in the process. And often the CAB, which is a Community Advisory Board or Community Action Board, is a really diverse group of individuals who really are responsible for being, the community bridge or the liaisons, taking messages into or taking information back to the community, and bringing information to the table to inform efforts going forward. But even with the CAB, there have been challenges in diversifying the CAB because, there are certain people don't have time to show up to, they have childcare, they have transportation issues, they have a job that won't allow them to show up during the time frame, or they have housing instability, whatever the case may be. It is a true challenge. And honestly, I think that the best community engagement efforts have been at the grassroots level, looking at the Black Panther movement as a great example, and really going into communities and making sure that everyone was involved at the ground level. And I personally don't think that we have done a very good job of that in research. That grassroots ground level advocacy is not something that's well funded. And honestly, it's not something that's really funded at all. So, and it really requires time, effort, commitment, and resources to do that and do that well. I'd like to hear what my other panelists feel about that.
I'm right behind you, Michele. I really think one of the things, I'll tell a story. So when I became the outreach coordinator for one of the groups, I was in charge of a CAB, and I was never really familiar with that much around CAB and what the purpose and all of that. I mean, I've read a little bit, but I didn't have any lived experience yet with that. And the irony of it was the CAB quickly, like there was only like 3 or 4 people on the CAB, and they quickly all disappeared. And so I had a meeting where no CAB members showed up. And then I had a second meeting like that. And I thought, okay, I need to talk to people about what is going on. And I found out from the people that the word CAB itself was off-putting. Community Advisory Board, they thought of boards as like, people who are sitting in these leatherback chairs with pipes and making high-level decisions and like that. And they didn't feel that that was their place. And the advisory part really tripped them up because they thought, what can I tell the doctors? The doctors know so much more. And they didn't have any feelings of their own lived experiences being valuable. And it gave me a whole way of approaching CAB differently, where I stopped referring to it CABs. We weren't having CAB meetings, we were having community meetings. We used to have them outside of the hospital setting so people could go to different areas to have that. But it was really finding even like just getting people involved in the CAB that were not the ones that are already sort of driven to get involved with research. Because I think what Barbara brought up was those questions of privilege that let certain people participate. It's really that, you know, that their lives are so privileged to begin with, they can access researchers and they feel comfortable talking to researchers. They don't have that distrust as much because they're part of the paradigm that's favoring them. So I really think like we don't realize sometimes what is keeping people from engaging with us, but even the terms that we use, and Lord knows there are so many acronyms in HIV that are off-putting, and we all throw them around so much that people are just overwhelmed. You know, the first CAB meeting for anybody can be really a hard decision. So the other thing that I would always do is I would take them out to lunch. If I had a new member, I wanted to hear about their lives, and I would sit down to lunch with them, paying for the lunch and just talking and finding out what their interests are. And that helped me then figure out ways that they might actually be able to get involved in the research that we have going on, finding out what they love, what drives them, what's their passions, because then you're valuing them as an individual, and they're going to realize that you're interested in them beyond just as a member of a group or as a research participant. We're actually caring about what they do. And I'd love to know their things so I can elevate that. I think elevating people, raising people up, it's always important, especially when we're dealing with people who are traditionally marginalized and dispossessed.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you for your question, Barbara. Rahel or Michele, do you have any last thoughts before we move on?
I think Michele said that I think working on, on some of the HIV project that I have been involved with, I think HIV in general, especially in communities of color, is one of the most stigmatized, health issue. And working with grassroots organizations who are working in the communities, providing social services and other services not related to HIV, and also through community health navigators and facilitating focus groups and interviews. I think that had helped us learn about what are the needs of these communities. Yes, we do know that HIV is affecting these communities, but there are 500 different other issues that are dealing with. So trying to work in our capacity to understand and learn, possibly to connect them with organizations or institutions that could help them, which in turn, build trust with those community members, because usually we approach communities when we want to do a research project or when we get a grant to start a program. So we have to change our mentality in, what are their immediate needs are. Like if we start from there, then we can build on that. HIV research or any other, research projects, even though it is beneficial for the community, unless we address other issues or figure out a way to connect those community members to organizations or institutions who could help them, but stay in that community, keep your relationship, even though when we don't have anything to do or when we're not doing what we want to do, if our intention is to help the communities, we gotta stay and try to do whatever we can, and we'll get there when we get there. So it's not about our priority, it's about their own priority and their immediate needs.
Thank you.
I just wanted to underscore the access part of what was said earlier too, is that's huge. And I think research and really any level of need from community, if an organization or entity is reaching out to the community and not supplying support for access, you're not going to get the engagement that you're hoping for. And generally, you know, it is those people who have a more flexible schedule, or they're most often I see a lot of retired folks who are doing a lot of that outreach because they have the time. And if we're looking to build a diverse group of individuals who are contributing towards the research or towards any partnership that you're trying to create, you have to make sure there's access. There were some meetings or opportunities that I've seen that have been scheduled at 8 a.m., for example. If I am a mother and I have to take my child to daycare or to school, or if I'm doing school from home, Lord have mercy, I can't meet it. That's not doable. And maybe I really do want to contribute because I feel like I have a lot to add to the table, but you know what, I just can't make that time. And maybe I don't feel like I have the power to suggest another time. So really opening up that space so that there is the opportunity to have that dialogue of, you know what, we have a group of people who are really interested, but this time doesn't work for them. Are you available during this time? And maybe that will open up that space and bring more people. Or what I love is multiple time options. So then you can switch it up. Then you have a wide range of things for people to choose from. Then again, that gives them the agency to say, you know what, I'm available at this time. I'm dedicating myself to this. I can make time for this. And that for me brings me and makes me more involved in that space. Like, I am excited to be here. I'm ready to be here. My mind is in this and I can contribute. And I feel valued because they gave me the opportunity to join and participate.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michele. Thank you to all the panelists for the great responses. Jen Adair, I know you had a great question in the chat. Did you have that same question with your redheads?
Yeah, Michael suggested that I try to ask it in here. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Sorry,
Yes.
I apologize. I am taking a kid to school in the moment. So that is why I can't have my camera on, or I won't be able to hear your awesome answers. And thank you for setting this up. It's really amazing. I would love to hear some specific examples of awesome moments in community engagement from all of you. And really what stood out to you in those moments that made them so awesome.
I can go. I think it being involved in the Harambe project, I think one of the most engaging and an awesome moment is when I was involved in facilitating a focus group and, you know, talking about HIV prevention and AIDS. It is something that is not very common in the Ethiopian community, but our focus group discussion was scheduled for an hour and we ended up, I think we did it for 3 hours. Transcribing that was another, you know, challenge, but it was, the discussion was so different than I expected because we had worked so much to bring communities together, even to talk about HIV, because nobody talks about it, yet it affects our community more than any other communities, especially in Seattle. And to hear it, like, you know, I think having an open discussion and people be able to ask questions and also the interest in their willingness to support the work. But I think it is because we approached the community from the beginning, from the inception of the project. And these communities have been involved, and we've had transparency from, the beginning. And I think that is, that's what I consider, a successful community engagement. But we still continue to work on other capacity, even though that we work with community organizations who serve, the East African community, even though the research is on hold because of, different funding challenges. We still are in the community providing, chronic disease prevention workshops and providing vaccines for COVID-19. So I think, everything that we're doing in the community is keeping us present in the community. So whatever we bring to that community, now we do, they trust us, they respond to us. And one thing that I wanted to mention before I forget is even being involved in the Harambe project, a lot of this grant for new researchers, sometimes they might not be able to get funded because NIH might not see the value in the work that we do at a community level. So what I encourage researchers to do is, in those occasions, figure out to stay in the community and, continue to be involved in providing other, services or volunteer. That will keep you connected. And whenever that time comes, when it is time to do, to do your research, then the community will work with you. And that's all I have to add.
I'll share a few stories. I just think of them more as stories. So you all remember 2 years ago when we went into lockdown and how it just seemed to happen all of a sudden, beginning of March or middle of March for some people. And it threw everything into a spin for everybody. And we had normal CAB meetings scheduled the fourth Tuesday of every month. And we decided that we should make our CAB meeting a meeting about everything that we knew about COVID and HIV, and just answer people's questions and make it a resource time where for anybody who had a question, no matter what it was, come to this meeting. And that meeting, normally our meetings have maybe 35 to 70 people sign up for them, and then 15 to 20 maybe show up. We hit a nerve with that because we had 585 people sign up for that. And that was our first webinar, and it really went overtime because we took time to answer everybody's question. And we were lucky because our director of our clinic also was working in COVID already in those early days and helping create the protocol. So we had an expert that could answer their questions. And we went through all sorts of details, like how people should handle their mail. But we just let them drive the conversation. She had a presentation, but everything that we knew at that point about people living with HIV and COVID, we tried to answer, including sometimes saying, we don't know, there's no data on that. So it was great to take our expertise, but really to just be there as a source of information. And I think that really helped develop a sense of trust around those questions, because we sat there, and in fact, our meeting went overtime for another hour. I remember I didn't have lights on in my apartment and everything had gotten dark because we were just so involved that way. Another thing that we've done, going to their things, going to things that are not just all your research, and supporting their work. So we had a group here for a while in Seattle that we started called the Multicultural HIV Hepatitis Action Network, or MON, is how we would call it. And it was made up of all the organizations, and we often did things around the awareness days that have been established, and they were testing events, which for someone who's working in treatment research, there was not a lot of quote unquote obvious value for doing the support for that. But there was tons of support given, and those were really vital because it was engaging with not only our community members that were involved with organizations, but the regular community just that would be going there for their testing events. So whether it was for whatever sort of key population was being targeted, we got to actually interact with all of them and support them. So there's quotas for testing that people need to get done. How many people have they tested to keep that money coming in for them? And that event was really just to benefit, those events were really to benefit those organizations and help them reach their quotas that they needed to do. So it did eventually help our research because it helps develop that relationship, but it wasn't about us getting some sort of direct benefit from the event itself. It was about us supporting their work and being a conduit for their work and for them to get their points that way. So I always think it's important to do things like that.
Thank you, Michael. Micheale or Michele, do you have any examples of trust building interactions that you've had?
I think the first one that comes to mind is actually how my church started our health ministry is through Faith, Health, and Action, which is a program that was started through Carol Milgard Breast Center. And after they noticed that there was a high rate of Black women who were being diagnosed with breast cancer in Pierce County, they really launched this program to connect with Black women. The first step was connecting with Black churches. And that was really, really successful in the first year. And then they expanded to Latinx churches. And then it expanded again to Samoa and Pacific Islander churches. And now 7 years later, there have been more than 30 churches that have been a part of this program. And I think what it has also served to do is inform the research, get more women tested, get more connected to the breast center or to financial aid, or get them transportation to those areas or to their appointments, to get them support and support with people who look like them or who speak a language that's familiar to them. And I think that that's been really crucial, especially when you're reaching out to certain communities. If you want to connect with a certain community, I think what I love about what Carol Milgard really did is that they said, you know what, we acknowledge you as the subject matter experts. We acknowledge you as the individuals who know where your community congregates, or, you know what, okay, we'll start here. Where do your ministries lie within the city, within Pierce County? And it really spread all the fingers out and brought so many women, to the breast center. They also started reaching out for prostate cancer. And so it's really about trusting the community as well. I think that was the most successful part of that, because they give each church money to do their health ministry, to really run it the way that they see fit for their congregation. And what we do is when we get more people involved, we get the answers to the surveys, or we connect with them. If they have individuals that they want to bring information to our congregations, we're able to do that. And it's a trust that's kind of built over time. So if Carol Milgard needed to reach out to us and say, you know what, we were able to get a certain amount of women there, or to Carol Milgard, and we saw an increase in screenings. Okay, great. What can we do to build on that? Or, what did you use at your church that brought more women in to be screened? And how can we share that to our Latinx churches? Or how can we share that to our Pacific Islander churches? And really just spread that support. And it's been really, really successful. And it continues to grow, and they continue to get funding to reach out to more and more churches. And so I would say that's been the most successful program that I've seen really grow and thrive within Pierce County, and specifically in the group that I'm with. So it's been really awesome.
Thank you, Micheale. Michele, any last thoughts?
Yeah, and sorry everyone that my video is not working. Is there an echo as well? Something's going on with my So is that just me?
I see like 3 of you, but it's all good. I can still hear you and see you. So I think we can
Okay.
go ahead and move.
Okay, so one of the things that I wanted to point out is the longstanding relationship that we've had with African Americans Reach and Teach Health Ministries and Joycelyn Thomas, who is a nurse and a provider in South King County, made a response to COVID possible early on. It became really clear after a vaccine was developed for COVID that uptake in South King County was really low. And so the city of Seattle and Fred Hutch was really trying to figure out how to increase vaccine access and uptake in South King County. So I have been in conversations with Mary and Kathleen and Joycelyn about the same issue, and they were really interested in having a vaccination site in South King County. So because we've had this ongoing relationship, we were able to really quickly come together and get a vaccine site at New Beginnings Christian Fellowship in Kent. And they have been up and running for, I can't remember how many months, but soon after the vaccine were available, they were scheduling appointments and have been a real resource for BIPOC communities in South King County. And I think that relationship has really, has really sort of opened the eyes of many people at some of the institutions. And we are working to establish a long-term clinic or academy in South King County. It's very much in the beginning phases of discussion, but we're definitely thinking about how to keep that going, because that clinic and all of the other vaccination sites in the community really made a difference in ensuring vaccine equity in COVID. And I think for many people, I personally knew that this was always a possibility and always a good resource. But I think for many people, it really cemented the importance of having long-term places in the community where people can go to get vaccinated and other services. So for me, that is the most recent great example of a community partnership.
Thank you, Michele. Yeah, I love that. I love these examples that you have all gave, but I think that a lot of the times the best way to engage with communities, or the most positive experiences that we've all had, is in-person experiences. And we've known that with the current pandemic, that has been a struggle. So a good question in the chat was how, or what sorts of examples do you have on how building relationships in the context of social distancing and virtual spaces?
I think in the communities that I have been engaged with, the East African communities, actually the Zoom and virtual workshop has been successful. We've been providing workshops on cancer prevention, diabetes prevention, hypertension, the importance of, mental health, and also even physical activity. We have created some physical activity videos where people can access it when they're at home. So we thought, I guess the challenge in the beginning was, a lot of people these communities do not have access, they don't have, tablets and computers, to be able to attend virtual workshops, but we work with different organizations to actually purchase tablets and provide it to, especially like the communities with multi-generational households, so that they can access. And in some cases we have to train them how to, we uploaded the Zoom and train them how we can, they can access it. But a lot of I work with a lot of immigrant communities, and most of them access YouTube and like WhatsApp, because that's how they communicate with their family members back home. So we were able to kind of leverage that to provide health education. But it had, surprisingly, it has been successful. But with that comes, with all the people, not, because community is something that is everything for some populations. So that created a lot of issues, being siloed and not be able to come together in person. But more than I have expected in the communities that I have been working with, it has been successful. Just like, but we have to also work hard to make sure that they do have the tablets and they do have the computers, so that they can, they can access, and they can, whatever programs we are providing them.
Yeah, I loved all of that, what you said, Rahel. I really thought that was important, is building that capacity for people even to be able to participate via Zoom. It takes a lot of lessons, a lot of learning, sometimes a lot of hand-holding until people get comfortable. And I thought also, like, I had some benefits with Zoom. I could reach people who I wasn't reaching when we had in-person meetings, because they live in Pierce County and the traffic is so horrible between Tacoma and Seattle that people can't drive up for a live meeting, but they could join via Zoom. And when it was normalized that way, they can always participate. And the challenge, I think, for me will be how to get a successful hybrid meeting so people can still tune in from wherever they are around the world, but also then have that in-person part that people still do like to break bread with each other, I think is important. Something else that I've done, I thought was really a fun thing. I had this crazy idea early on, and it came to me through the Reunion Project, for whom I do a lot of steering committee work. And I wanted to have a dance party. And I wanted to have a dance party for Long-Term Survivors Day, June 5th. And we did it. And it was a wonderful way of creating something that was totally about people enjoying themselves and just coming together to enjoy the company. And we had a DJ sign up. I created videos that people could download to change their background, like the one on me. And then we even taught people how to use the video filters. I was talking about this with people here, but you have these video filters that they give you with Zoom where you can actually put on quote unquote costumes. So I was there, and then people could chair dance or actually get up in their apartments and dance for us. And we would use the spotlight feature to feature certain people and make it look like they were dancing with each other. And it was just using all of this technology for fun and for people to enjoy each other's experiences and to kind of let off some of the steam, because I think we had a lot of problems with COVID, sort of, and everyone feeling cooped up and unconnected with people. So those were some successful things that I felt I was happy to do that really addressed this time in terms of the time of COVID that we're in.
I just wanted to add, I think it's important to acknowledge that some communities still meet in person. And I know when I was working with PCAF, we connected with Tacoma Indian Center, and they continued to meet throughout the entire pandemic. And they held space for individuals who maybe didn't have access to the internet or to a safe space, a roof over their head. So maybe I always advocate for some type of hybrid. So I really appreciate what you said, Michael, is determining how to provide some type of hybrid option, I think is a space that we're moving into, and I think it's doable. And I think there are a lot of organizations that are being cautious, understandably so, but some may be cautious to a fault in the way of there is space that we're holding. And if you are maybe not comfortable with coming, maybe that's also a point of rapport building. Like, are you willing to come to this meeting where our community members are gathering? Because some groups are transitioning to being in person, maybe socially distanced, or I'm hoping socially distanced. But are you willing to step into that space with us? Are you willing to show up in person? I think that's also a way of saying, you know what, okay, like they were willing to come even though maybe this isn't, their normal thing. This isn't their jam, but they're here, they're breaking bread, as Michael said. And just having that option is always, I think, really nice.
And I think that COVID has really made it important to think about how you can continue to nurture relationships in the context of physical distancing. So instead of having lunch or coffee or after dinner meetings with many of the community partners that I have, we would go on walks and meet with our own coffee or our own tea. So, it's a win-win situation. I'm out getting, exercise and enjoying nature and, continuing to nurture the relationships that I've had with people, for, since I've been here, since I moved to Seattle in 2004. And I think that that's really critical. And it goes back to what all of us have been saying about relationships. If a relationship is important to you, you find a way to continue that relationship, even in the context of a global pandemic. And you're gonna find a way to connect with family who's important with you. You're gonna find a way to connect with your partner, and the same is true for any partnerships or relationships you have professionally. And I think that is really critical, that we, again, goes back to how we see community partnerships and how we view them as relationships. That really will place the importance on them, and you'll find a way to connect.
Thank you all. I love the points of acknowledging the importance of in-person meetings for a lot of communities, and also turning the so-called limitation of Zoom or online meetings into a possible benefit with these hybrid meetings. So I think we have time for one more question, and then we'll move on to closing remarks and our key takeaways. Connie Salem had a great question about if it would be more helpful to engage communities in a broader health approach or specific diseases such as HIV or cancer. Is our community engagement too siloed, or does it add a burden to expect communities to attend multiple events?
I'll kickstart this one. Again, going back to the Faith, Health, and Action programming, I think it is more beneficial to address the whole person and the whole community's needs. All of this is very much interconnected. Everything that we go through is very much interconnected. I was on a call yesterday where we're talking about addressing COVID. Not only you can't address COVID without addressing housing instability, without addressing food insecurity. So there are a bunch of different layers that go into addressing the needs of an individual. And I find it more beneficial when an organization or when research is trying to address me or my community as a whole, because that means that you actually care, about how I'm going to benefit as a rounded person, or how I'm going to progress as a person and my family or things like that. And in the chat, they said, HIV is very stigmatized, and we probably all know that on this call. We acknowledge that. And so jumping right into a new relationship and talking about HIV is not always going to be something that's comfortable for the community to really dive into. There may be communities that acknowledge it's a problem, but I'm not going to say for my, I might be less willing to contribute as an individual to that if you just jump in with something that I might not be comfortable with, or I've experienced a lot of stigma, or maybe I've lived with a lot of individuals who are living with HIV, and I don't want to share, my experience with them, or I'm nervous to share, or maybe I'm an individual living with HIV, and I don't feel comfortable sharing with you that my status or my experience before you ask me, are there any other things that I can support you with? So I think it's really a great idea to do that. I also saw the comment about funding, and that is very true. But I think that you can get creative. I think it's important to not narrow your lens on funding or not narrow the idea of diversifying the pot of funds that you have. There are ways to engage the community, and there are meaningful ways to engage them around other health disparities that we've seen, but also rotate that main focus back to HIV. And I think that that's really important, especially for me as in my position as I was connecting with Black organizations. HIV isn't the only issue plaguing the Black community, so I'm going in and I'm talking about other ways that I can support them, and then bringing back sexual health and wellness, and bringing back information on HIV testing or HIV education after I've made my rapport stronger, after I've said, what, I am a familiar face. I am here to support you in any way that you need. But if you need me around sexual health, I'm here. I am here to support you specifically in this area with these resources, but I can also route you to this or direct you here or connect you with this individual, and do it in a way that feels warm and engaging and supportive.
I can add to that. I think in the communities that I work with, specifically with the immigrant community, sexual health or STD screening is, you can't talk about it. Nobody can talk about it. Nobody's open even to discuss it. So how we have been able to implement screening is during our health fair, we would add it, we will have diabetes, screening. We will check hypertension, mammogram, and then people have to do all, and we give incentives, so if you complete all the screenings, you will get, $20, or once, we give them a card. That way people are not thinking about, HIV screening, because if we try to offer that, even forget about screening, even to provide the education, nobody will show up. Nobody is, it's one of the most stigmatized health issues in our community. So we have to strategically figure out ways on how to provide the information. And the other way that worked for us is actually working with faith-based leaders, because they are the most trusted community members. So it's, even with that, we have to figure out, okay, what information can they communicate with their church members? They can talk about prevention, but they can't talk about treatment, or they can't talk about, certain things in the church. So we have to come up with ways, okay, we can engage the faith-based leaders to provide the information, but we can use the annual health fair or an event where there are food and music, and then we can provide the screening, and then, you know, make it so that people are not so focused on one thing. But even, you know, cancer screening or hypertension, like high blood pressure, blood pressure screening, all of them, people are not, they don't want to know. I think that's the thing. And the culture is like, if I go, they're gonna tell me something is wrong with me, so it's better that I don't know. So changing that set of mind, you have to constantly think about what would be the best way, what would work. Just because we know the data and we know how bad these illnesses are affecting these communities, doesn't mean that it doesn't mean anything to the communities. So we need to constantly figure out a way, like, how can we engage, you know, the seniors, the families, the youth who are growing up in the United States, don't have the culture. How do, you know, educate the parents so that they can be open to, you know, go screening? How could we provide, and how could we bring mobile vaccine units to spaces so that they can come to a place where they're familiar to, and we can provide, you know, volunteers who can speak their language, who can explain everything to them. So you have to constantly be not one thing work for one population or one community or one demographic. It's always a constant thing, but I think providing it as providing them all at the same time is the best way. Because if you want to go try to do HIV screening or trying to do HIV research work with the community, the chances of you being successful is very, very little. So
I wanted to just bring up something as well, and it's sort of moving, I guess, to a different focus, but it's just something I wanted to bring up before we end it is, you know, when you make community members co-creators of your research, they're going to own it as much as you do from the beginning through the end. And the end is something that we never really think about. The dissemination of those research results, as we like to say, is so key, and we researchers fail miserably there. So you can take two big examples when it comes to PrEP rollout and when it comes to the whole messaging around treatment as prevention. The research wasn't really co-created, and so therefore these results came about and the communities didn't own them, and it took a long time for them to adopt these technologies. PrEP rollout was sort of abysmal from the beginning, and there was a lot of fights even in the beginning when the research was being implemented, and they weren't really involved in that, but they didn't own it. So at the end, we were struggling to have PrEP messaging that would reach people and education about it, and including all the populations that could benefit from it. And then when we come to the U=U message, which is, I think, one of the amazing things, here we had this research and the communities weren't involved in owning it. And then when they finally hear about it, which is like years after the studies were done, they're like, this is what I've been waiting for. And they seized that message, they massaged it, they made it that U=U message, and then they've run with it because they see the value of that research answer helping their lives in dramatic ways. And if we do a better job of incorporating community as co-creator in the research, I think we will have better rollout, which is one of my hopes for the whole cure enterprise, that we have more community involved in that. So if there is that happy day where we achieve an HIV cure or a remission where you don't have to take daily pills anymore, I want them to own that as much as the researchers who achieve it. And that way we will see our rollout of any eventual cure hopefully be far and wide reaching. Sorry, I just wanted to chime in because I saw we were running out of time.
No, I appreciate it, Michael. Thank you, everyone, for your thoughts. So we are running out of time. Now we're going to just have, or I just want to ask the panelists and the audience members to give their final closing thoughts. Specifically for the audience, what are some key takeaways that you've gotten from this, and hopefully some actionable steps that you can take in pursuing your research? And to the panelists, just your final key thoughts.
relationship building. I think all of us have said that, you know, my current conversations with some of our community partners are about how we can get community members more involved in health and wellness and create a pipeline for our youth to be the future researchers, the future doctors, because we've seen, you know, continual decrease in med school applications, particularly among Black individuals. And the community is really concerned about that. And I include myself as part of that community. And so, you know, these are the kinds of things that, you know, are the foundation of these research efforts, these community efforts. Like, you know, how do we address these issues that community are seeing, that all of us are seeing through the work that we do? And, you know, and that is sometimes challenging when you're funded to do HIV research and it doesn't fit neatly into an HIV silo. So I think, you know, continuing to have the conversations and identifying ways that we can move the work forward through these relationships is really critical.
Thank you, Michele. Rahel, any final thoughts?
I think always to remember to respect people's beliefs and culture, and also don't take anything personal. You know, stay focused, and don't give up, because you know you have to be persistent. You got to stay in it and build relationship and build that trust. And as long as you have that, I think, you know, you will succeed.
Thank you, Rahel. Michealea, any final thoughts?
I think just really going in, I think it's all about being genuine when you step into a space with community. I think most people can sense when someone is being genuine about really wanting to connect with you or your community to further serve you and produce a work that will support the community, support everyone who's involved, and so on. So, you know, I think that lives virtually as well as in person, you know, and I think really stepping in with the humility to be able to be genuine and learn from a community is just very important. So yeah, those would be my final thoughts.
Thank you, Michealea. Michael, go ahead.
I would say to researchers, make sure that your research projects fully fund engagement. Ask for as much money as you can. You could never have too much money for engagement. I don't think that we do that. And I think if there are any regulators or any policymakers or anything, I think we need to really make sure that the NIH requires community engagement in HIV research and funds it. I mean, I work for a research network that has no official centralized community engagement, no strategy. It's just left to the individual sites all around the world to figure out how to do it for themselves. And I think that's a crime that the NIH has never really demanded that of the treatment network that I work for. And so I think we really need to fund community engagement, ask for the funding, demand the funding, and really go after that. And then also to remember, make your research participants co-creators in the research. They're giving blood, they're creating the research with you. It's really a co-creation, and keep that in mind. And if you treat it in that honorable way, I think you'll get a successful answer to your research questions.
Thank you, Michael. All right, let's give a brief round of applause, virtual round of applause to all of our panelists and all of our audience for these great questions and great responses in the chat. So this meeting was recorded. It'll be posted shortly and be posted in the CFAR YouTube channel and OCE website. And also the chats should be saved as well, because we had some great thoughts in there too. So yeah, thank you everyone. I hope you have a great rest of your day.